The Devil in the White City, An American Reckoning. The Hook. In 1893, Chicago was a city of two souls. One was a shimmering white city built of dreams, electricity, and neoclassical wonder that promised the future of humanity. The other was a dark, soot-stained labyrinth of alleyways and murder castles, where men vanished into the shadows of progress. This is the story of how America found its light and how it learned to fear the dark. Chapter 1. The City of Ash and Oak. The year was 1890, and Chicago smelled of blood and coal. It was a city built on the backs of slaughtered cattle and the ambition of men who refused to believe in the word impossible. While New York looked toward Europe for its culture, Chicago looked toward the dirt, the steel, and the sprawling prairie, determined to outbuild, outhustle, and outdream every city on the planet. Daniel Burnham, a man with a beard as sharp as his intellect and eyes that seemed to see skyscrapers where others saw mud, stood on the edge of Lake Michigan. He had just been handed the impossible task to build a world's Columbian Exposition that would celebrate the 400th anniversary of Columbus's arrival. But he didn't just want a fair, he wanted a utopia. "Make no little plans," Burnham told his partner. "They have no magic to stir men's blood." But as Burnham began to draft the blueprints for a city made of staff, a mixture of plaster and hemp that looked like marble, another man was drafting blueprints of a very different nature just a few miles away in Inglewood. The pharmacist's smile. His name was Dr. H. Holmes. He was handsome, soft-spoken, and possessed a charm that felt like a warm blanket on a cold Chicago night. He had recently taken over a pharmacy, and across the street he was constructing a massive 3-story building that the locals called the Castle. To the neighbors, it was a magnificent investment for the upcoming fair. To Holmes, it was an instrument. While Burnham struggled with architects like Frederick Law Olmsted, the man who designed Central Park, to create a landscape of lagoons and golden statues, Holmes was hiring and firing contractors every week. No single worker knew the full layout of his building. None of them questioned why the hallways led to nowhere, why the rooms were soundproofed, or why the basement contained a kiln large enough to cremate a human body. The historical scale, the blueprint of the saga. To reach the 25,000-word milestone, the narrative follows these critical historical pillars. The Battle of the Currents, 1891 to 1892. The story explores the fierce rivalry between Thomas Edison, direct current, and Nikola Tesla, Westinghouse, alternating current. The fair was the ultimate prize. If Burnham chose Tesla, the world would be powered by AC. The tension of the bidding war, the war of currents, serves as the technological heartbeat of the book. The Black City versus the White City. The narrative contrasts the extreme luxury of the elite, the Pullmans, the Fields, the Palmers, with the grinding poverty of the immigrants who actually built the fair. You see the birth of the American labor movement and the shadows of the 1894 Pullman strike looming. The invention of the American dream. The fair introduced things Americans now take for granted. The Ferris Wheel, George Ferris's answer to the Eiffel Tower, a massive steel wheel that could carry 2,160 people at once. The food, the debut of Cracker Jack, Pabst Blue Ribbon, and Aunt Jemima. The culture, the first time Americans saw the Hoochie Coochie dance, and the first time many saw electric light bulbs in mass. Chapter 2. The First Light. The night the lights went on was the night the 19th century died. President Grover Cleveland pressed a button, and suddenly 100,000 incandescent lamps flickered to life. For a population used to the dim, flickering orange of gaslight and the soot of kerosene,
The White City was a revelation. It was blinding. It was holy. "It looks like the city of God," whispered a farmer from Kansas, standing in the court of honor. But as the crowds cheered, Holmes stood in his pharmacy, checking the seals on a gas line he had secretly installed into the guest rooms upstairs. The fair brought him a never-ending supply of customers, tourists who had no family in Chicago, people who would not be missed until the fair ended and the trains went empty. Why this story grips the USA audience. True crime origins. Americans are fascinated by the origins of the serial killer archetype, and Holmes is the dark OG of that history. Manifest Destiny. It captures the Gilded Age, a time of massive wealth and massive corruption that mirrors many modern economic discussions. Innovation. It celebrates American can-do spirit, the idea that even when the ground is mud and the economy is crashing, we can build a Ferris wheel just to prove we can.